Hello, my name is Hannah Hobson from the University of York, and I've been part of a special interest research group on the topic language, communication and mental health. We already know that a lot of children and young people with mental health issues have problems with their language and communication. What our group wanted to do was find out what research questions people would like answered on this topic. So what research would families, clinicians, researchers and other professionals who work with children and young people, what research would they like done on language, communication and mental health? We conducted a survey, we had online workshops, and I'm going to share with you what we heard from those people. So the sorts of questions that people wanted answering fell into two groups. One group of questions was really about understanding the relationships between language and mental health. The other group of questions was really about clinical applications and what we could do to improve outcomes for children and young people. So the sorts of questions about understanding why language problems and mental health problems go together were things like, are there shared risk factors for these things? So trauma, for example, we might expect to affect someone's language development and also their mental health as well. Perhaps that might explain why the two sometimes go together. Perhaps also language gives us some skills that are good for our mental health, such as being able to regulate our emotions well. It could also be that there are some shared biological factors between language and mental health. So maybe some similar genes influence our language development as well as our mental health. Those are all questions that are really about understanding why language and mental health often go together. Our other set of questions were really concerned with changing clinical practice and clinical outcomes. So some questions are about the professionals who work with these children and young people. What do mental health professionals need to know about language and communication? Are our assessments and diagnostic tools going to work for children with language needs? So the kinds of tools that we use to detect mental health problems in the first place, are they going to work for children and young people with language and communication problems? And do we need to be adapting our therapies and our interventions when we're looking at mental health? Do those therapies need to be changed in order for them to be accessible for children and young people with language needs? So those are our two groups of questions. The why questions, why do language and mental health go together? And the what now questions, what can we do about this and change clinical practice? We also heard from people some of their ideas about what might be difficult to do this research and things we might need to bear in mind when we're trying to get it done. So one thing people mentioned was that there are lots of different professional groups around children and young people. We've got psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health practitioners, speech and language therapists, teachers, and all of those groups might approach language and mental health quite differently with different terms and different approaches. So how can we bring everybody together to work as one in this sort of research programme? Another concern people had was that we included everybody in the research. So there was a concern that perhaps some people who might really want to take part in research might feel unable to, perhaps because they find it very intimidating, perhaps being given lots of questionnaires is very difficult for their language and communication, and that might be a barrier. And therefore we'd only really be hearing from some people in our research. Another concern was when we're measuring mental health or language for our research, how do those two things affect each other? So how are we going to measure separately and carefully mental health symptoms and language ability? And finally, some of the questions were really asking about whether early language and mental health influenced each other a lot later on in development. So, does somebody's language when they're very little matter for their mental health when they're maybe a teenager, for example? To answer those sorts of questions, we need long projects with a lot of investment, and which is a challenge. So just to summarise our thoughts really, there are loads of research ideas that are ready for researchers to pick up on this topic, and if people want to read our report, there's even more ideas in there, but we really want to highlight that there's no need to wait for us to understand totally the relationship between language and mental health, for us to already start changing clinical practice. So we feel actually it's fairly urgent that we start to think about how to make treatments more accessible, making sure that the tools we're using are suitable those are things we can get on and do now, and I think we'd really urge researchers to take that up and change evidence-based practice. If you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to get in touch. I just want to say a big thank you to all the families, clinicians, researchers and other people who contributed to our survey or our workshops or supported our work in any way over the last couple of years. Thank you ever so much. Bye.